So, hello and welcome back. And first of all, massive apologies that this is a day late, but I'm still not feeling amazing, but I feel so much better than I did yesterday, at least for now. So, I'm going to get this recorded so that we can actually have a video tonight because I feel really bad. I think last night was the first time in like 2 years that I haven't put a video up every single night. And darn it, I hated breaking that streak, but I don't know what was up. All I know is I couldn't get warm and I kept getting dizzy and just feeling really terrible. So I just went to bed, cranked my electric blanket all the way up to high, piled a few more blankets on top of me, and slept most of yesterday. I would get up and try and get a few things done and just felt miserable. So I was like, you know what? We're just going to spend the day in bed. I haven't done that in a very long time. And I'm not even 100% sure that I'm not going to end up doing that again later on today because I feel better, but still a little bit on the iffy side. So pardon that honestly, I probably look the same as I always do because I'm not that focused on what I look like. It's one of the blessings of getting older. I'm like, yeah, I look like me, whatever. But we are going to attempt to recap another chapter of The Phoenix Transformed by Mercedes Lackey and James Mallory. And if I manage to stay feeling decent today, I'm going to try to get ahead so that I don't ever leave you guys with a night without a video again, but we'll see. So, yeah, if you remember, the last chapter was just facing zombies, which sounds terrible. And we got a little glimpse into Nyron's mind where she was basically thinking to herself, which sounds like a halfway decent plan, that she's just going to keep chipping away at the Isvani people until Bisochim is in utter despair and goes to her to stop it, in which case she will be able to make an entire new breed of demons to populate the world, getting everything she wants. She did also make a new bargain with the Fire Crown, saying that not only can she turn Bisochim to her will, but she can get the other two mages, Tercel and Harrier, to turn to her as well. Not exactly sure how she plans on doing that, but that seems to be her plan. And we left off with Harrier and everybody kind of just counting up their losses and trying to figure out what on earth to do next. So we're going to be picking back up with my recap of The Phoenix Transformed by Mercedes Lackey and James Mallory with Chapter 10, the aptly titled The Slow War. So Chapter 10 picks up with the Isvani people stopping to make their midday camp and Harrier telling Shariah that he wants everybody, not just the leaders, not just the Umari, not just the second in command, the Charams, but he wants everybody. And he wants to speak to everybody, including Xanatar and all of his young warriors and everybody. He wants the entire grouping. And Shariah's like, okay, you want to talk to everybody? Why? And he just tells her that he needs to let the Isvani people know that their way of dealing with everything isn't working anymore. And so when they halt, Harrier gets ready. He sits down and he makes his biggest speech yet, I think. He says, "Since we left Telenchital, we have lost 1,418 people to Aniran's attacks. We have another 604 people riding with us who are now permanently maimed. Last night, Aniran attacked us using a new creature, the Shamblers, using a new type of spell where anyone a Shambler kills becomes a Shambler. Bisochim can't undo the magic that makes them move and fight, and if he can't, I can't. You all know how hard it is to cut up the fresh ones, and without wood, they will be hard to burn, and we're out of wood. If we don't burn them when we can, Aniran will be able to use them against us again." That undoubtedly causes quite the stir among the Isvani. They hadn't quite heard it put to them that bluntly before, but Harrier is trying to lay everything out for them. He goes on, "Aniran is taking bodies from the Atreyu cities. Those catch fire easy, but if she can make even half of the dead into Shamblers, well, she can send about 36,000 of them against us." That disturbs everybody, including Xanatar, because suddenly everybody turns and looks at him like, if you hadn't killed all of the Atreyu people, then she wouldn't have this army put against us. Harrier's like, look, this isn't about what Xanatar did. This isn't about what Bisochim did. This is about what we're facing right now. He says, "There are less than 9,000 of us. We're running out of arrows. We're running out of spears. You already know we're also running out of food. And if Bisochim is killed, we aren't going to have any water." And Sathan, one of the leaders, is like, "All right, so tell us something we don't know." "I'm not done yet," Harrier said quietly. "We've faced Bolwarta and Sandwalkers and Black Dogs and Goblins, Ashtaban bugs, and now we've faced Shamblers. The thing is, I know that you know this. Aniran doesn't care about any of you. Not really. She'll torture you and she'll kill you because she's a demon and that's what she does. But she is doing this so that Bisochim or Tercel or I will bow down and worship her to make it stop. And we aren't going to do that. We would rather die." Everybody in the audience, I can't think of a better thing to call them than audience, but everybody who is listening completely shuts up. They're all focused on Harrier, who goes on. "Nothing that I told you back in the Lake of Fire has changed. None of the three of us can destroy Aniran. We need to get word to the elves, and her elven mages can hopefully bind Aniran until there's somebody born who can actually destroy her. But whether they can bind her or not, just letting people know that she's loose is important. If no one knows that Aniran is loose, then she wins because she can do whatever she wants to, and then it'll just be like back in the tales of Angriel the Black. Nobody knew who he was, and he almost destroyed everything." Harrier stopped, staring up at the canopy of the tent for a long moment before going on. "The Elven lands are a long way away, and Palasha's Veil is meant to keep people out, not let them in. I think I could pass through the veil, but even so, it's a long way away, and Tercel's the one that the elves will listen to, not me. So our best chance of warning someone and getting the help we need is to get to Arameth. But you need to know, even if we can reach the closest oasis and resupply, Akazis Atreyu is 2, maybe 3 moon turns north of that. We'll probably still run out of food before we get there, even if we eat the Shotars, but most of you won't have to worry about that because you will already be dead, if any of you survive to reach the northernmost city. Then Aniron will probably kill you rather than let any of you leave the Mandirian desert, so I can't ask you to come with us. And that's when a lot of the Isvani people start shouting and saying, "No, we're with you, Harrier. Of course we're with you." And Harrier's like, "I'm not done." He says, "This isn't some kind of stupid game to see who of you is braver. Look at the people next to you. Everybody. There's somebody on your left. There's somebody on your right. If we reach Akazidis Atreyu, neither of them will. That is how many, at least, of you are going to die. You can't live in the Isvani, unfortunately, but Aniron might not have stripped the surrounding area of everything that's alive. Anybody who heads east right now might have a chance. But I'm giving you warning, Aniron might just kill anybody who leaves us. But I know, and so do you, in the end, she's going to kill everybody who's here." Harrier stared at the carpet. "In the Bearleth, you all promised to come to Arameth with me. I am giving you back that promise. Everyone, you don't have to do this." That kind of sets everybody aback. Nobody that's there, Harrier can tell, either wants to say, "No, we're with you, Harrier. We're all going to die." But equally, nobody is like all that eager to say, "No, we're going to totally abandon you and make a run for our own skins." Finally, Liafa speaks up and says, "Is this everything that you wanted to tell us?" And Harrier says, "No. It's, if anybody decides to come with me, they're going to have to behave like an actual army. We're going to have watches, herd guards, camp patrols. Everything we have is going to be held in common and shared equally, because I don't want to hear about tribes. I don't want to hear about the time of the breaking of tribes. I'm sick of it." He looked around at everyone and says, "You wouldn't like it. None of you would like this." Liafa stands up and she's like, "Look, I'm going to lay it to you straight, Mr. Harrier Blue Robe. I don't like anything that has happened that since Bisochim came to us. Uh, I'm the only one pretty much left in my family, except for Shariah, who isn't even of the same tribe as me. All of my heirs are dead. And no, I don't like any of this, but, you know, we're going to ride with you. I don't know about any of the rest of the tribes, but I'm still following you because that seems to be the best chance that we have of getting anything done." And that's kind of where it breaks up. We join back a little bit later with Tercel, who's like, "Harrier, are you sure that you're okay? Not insane?" He's not quite sure what's going on with Harrier. He's like, he hadn't gotten the chance to tell Harrier about his suspicions that maybe his nightmares are actually still visions, but he's also a little bit concerned that Harrier is maybe biting off more than he can chew. He points out to Harrier that you know, how does he even know all these numbers that he was rambling off? Because Harrier is still thinking, or Tercel is still thinking of the Harrier that he knew back in school who needed help in math. Harrier's like, look, it's a wild magic thing. I can't really explain it to you. All I know is I laid out the bare facts. I have no idea who other than Leofa's tribe and Shariah's Nelzindar are actually coming with us. I don't care. All I know is we've got to go. I didn't make up any of those numbers, but I can't explain it to you. Harrier looks up and is like, I'm giving them an hour, and then I'm leaving. I don't care. I'm leaving with whoever wants to come along, and they're going to have to listen to me from there. Tercel hadn't believed that he would do it. No matter how stubborn Harrier got when he got mad, there were some things that were too important to lose your temper over, and Harrier had been saying from the beginning, and told them again today, that the only value that the Isvani had were as hostages, at least as far as an iron was concerned. If Harrier let anyone who wants to leave just leave, and Tercel thinks about the ones that he's pretty sure are just going to leave, especially Sathan and the Baratner tribe, then Tercel's like, he's just abandoning them to an iron. But an hour later, when Harrier said that it was time to leave, he packs up, and the few tribes that have already pledged to follow Harrier follow. Tercel's like, you can't do this. Watch me, Harrier said. He didn't slow down. He didn't speed up. He just kept walking. Tercel points out that the tents aren't even down yet. These people might actually want to come. He's like, they might. Or they might be staying here. Or they might be heading east. You know? I don't know. I don't care. I said I was leaving. Tercel sped up until he could jump in front of Harrier and make him stop. Look, you can't do this. You know that anyone who goes off by themselves is just going to be killed by an iron. Nothing has changed. Everything's changed, said Harrier. You know, Tur, I didn't plan on leading the Isvani anywhere. The lake of fire was drying up, well, the lake on top of it, and you didn't come back. Shariah, Sinarin, and I couldn't just go back to Abi Abadashar because we thought that Xanatar might follow us there and kill everyone. So I said I would take the Isvani back to the Isvai, and hey, maybe by then you'd show up with elven mages and I could just go home. But when you came back, you told me that you hadn't warned anybody and that Saravase couldn't fly, and Niren was hitting the caravans and people were dying. And we got back to the Isvai, and we found out that no one can live there now. And Aniron keeps killing people, and she's going to keep on killing people. And you know what? Not only do I have no idea why she's bothering with us instead of going north, I can think of 3 ways right now that she could get exactly what she wants. And letting everybody die? That's the answer? Said Tercel. No. What's the difference between the high magic and the wild magic? The most basic difference, the one that underlies it all, said Harrier. You want me to tell you? Said Tercel in disbelief. He couldn't figure out where Harrier was leading with this change of subject. That got him a tight, unhappy smile from Harrier. I know what it is. Do you? Tercel thinks about this for a little while, and I think this point was driven home in the Obsidian trilogy as well. And it's kind of impressive that Harrier, is understanding this much of the wild magic, considering he really hasn't had much lessons other than what is in his 3 books. So I'm kind of impressed. Tercel tries to figure out what the difference is. He says, well, the wild magic came first, and a bunch of the spells are different. High magic has a lot more equipment, but the results are always the same. You got to study for years, actually to learn it, and then you got to have some spell energy, and not that, said Harrier. And Tercel knew that Harrier was thinking about everything. Something else. And I know this is going to sound really stupid, especially coming from me, but with the wild magic, you have to ask. Ask, said Tercel. Ask, said Harrier. Permission from someone, even if you want to heal them, if you possibly can, from anybody that you want to have share in the spell cost of a spell, no matter what. Even if it was something that they want. Even if you think that they would say yes later, you have to ask. That's the difference between wild magic and high magic. I always asked, said Tercel. I know, said Harrier. But you didn't have to. And I think a dragon bond has to be different, because Saravase didn't want to help Bisochim call up an Iron, but because of the bond, he could still use her power. But he's still a wild mage, and he still should have asked. And Tercel's like, so, okay, so you're letting these people go off and get themselves killed because you're a wild mage? I don't get it. And then it hits him. You're giving them a choice. You're asking. And Harrier's like, yeah, I am. And if they choose to go off on their own, he thinks that they're going to die faster, but it will be their choice. And so they keep on moving. And when Harrier, Tercel, Bisochim, Saravase leave, of all the tribes, only the Nalzindar, the Kayastar, the Hinturi, and the remains of the Adante tribe ride with them. So they head on out. Saravase, a couple hours after they head out, announces that she hears something behind them. They circle around and they see, hey, it's pretty much the rest of the tribes. That's both good and bad. I mean, it's good because they're not going to die that night. It's bad because they might still probably just join in this slow and hopeless journey towards Arameth that Harrier doesn't think they're going to make, you know? Harrier is not expecting anybody to live through this. Tercel, I think, is still holding on to hope. Bisochim, who knows what he's thinking. He's still kind of in shock. But yeah, this is why this chapter is called The Slow War. Because it sure doesn't feel like a war. It feels like a journey to nowhere. But once everybody catches up, Harrier has got them all arranged, and there are still a few that have stayed behind. The Baranter and the Binarazan were the only 2 tribes who were determined to stay behind. Their leaders had spoke of heading east. Some of the Banatar, from what Tercel can figure out, are, trying to figure out exactly what to do. Some of them want to stay. Some of them want to head to maybe where the hills are. And Tercel wants to say that they should go back and try to reason with them, because he knows that the leader, Sathan, probably won't listen, but, he's pretty sure that anybody who stays behind is going to die. Tercel wondered, thinking if Harrier had thought this puzzle out to its logical end, why should Anirin let him or Bisuchim or any of the Isvani escape to warn anybody? Why should she leave anybody alive at all? Were they even trying to stay alive? Or were they trying to save the light from the dark? Those weren't the same goals. They couldn't be accomplished in the same way. In fact, they probably weren't both things that you could even try to accomplish at the same time. Does Harrier know that? Tercel wondered. This had been supposed to be his fight, Tercel thought. Since the first time he had had a vision of Anirin and the Lake of Fire, before he had been able to put names to them, he had known that this was his fight. But all he had done was wander around in circles as if he had all the time in the world because he had been too afraid to do what had to be done. He had had Sen Nights to think of a proper defense for Tarnatha Atreyu, or to just leave because Tarnatha Atreyu was one city and stopping Anirin before she could destroy all the cities was more important, and he hadn't. He got to Abi Abadashar, and he had a trail that was leading right to the Lake of Fire, and he hadn't taken it. He had delayed out of fear, and he had lost to Ankeldar and given Bitsochim the time to release Anirin, and the fact that they were all going to die now wasn't even the worst that he could think of. The worst part was that Tercel thought Harrier was making the same mistakes that he had, and he didn't think he could stop them. So Tercel's realizing far too late that the entire first two books were just a big delaying tactic that he probably shouldn't have done. That, possibly what he should have done was the minute he got the magic from Ankeldar, they should have flown straight to the Lake of Fire, keeping in mind that they didn't know where that was, but just flown straight there and joined this battle with Bisuchim, possibly killed him. We aren't going to think about the fact that killing Bisuchim would have meant killing Saravase, but this whole thing could have been stopped. And because he didn't, now she's loose, and he thinks that Harrier is probably leading them in circles and doing the same thing that Tercel had done, trying to delay, probably out of fear. So now we're going to shift perspectives, and we are going to rejoin Anirin after I get a drink and a few other things. So I will be right back. All right, drink obtained. Let's join up with Anirin. Anirin had become weary of these creatures. Weary and perhaps a little uneasy at the long, boring Sen nights of what had been meant to be a quick and entertaining game. Though she had sworn to the Fire Crown on the blood of the wild mage that she had not managed to turn to her will, that she would make all three of the mages serve her, she is feeling a little bit wary. Creatures of form were fragile, and they were easy to destroy, and she had not dared attempt to force their compliance by putting any direct spells on Harrier Bisuchim or on Tercel. She's only acting against the things that she thinks that they value. At first, she thought that it was going to be simple because, obviously Bisuchim wants to heal Saravase, but that didn't really work. So then she tries going against all of the things that he holds dear. She is thinking that the minute Bisuchim becomes her servant, then she could leave him to everything else, which would then cause the other two to swear to her as well. But to Aniron's disquiet, her plan was not proceeding in the fashion that she had so confidently predicted. These creatures, the ones capable of wielding magic, seemed to willfully embrace their own destruction. She thinks how she had even created some new spells. You know, the ones that called back the creatures that used to be alive and animated them, and that definitely seems to have thrown a wrench in their plans, but not enough of a wrench, and she does not know why. She is extremely upset about this because her chance of enslaving them all seems to be slipping out of her hands. And so Aniron toyed with her Ashtaban things, growing increasingly frustrated and increasingly bored. She brooded upon how best to force he who called her to bend to her will. And then Aniron discovers an unlooked for gift that does a lot to ease her boredom. And that is exactly what Tercel had been afraid of. Um, that's Sothan and the not Nelzindar, the Isvani people who have broken off on their own. And so we shift perspective yet again into the Umara Sathan. He's like, I'm not stupid. Anybody can see that the things that Harrier is talking about will lead to everybody dying, and that nobody's going to be able to make it to their elves, nobody's going to be able to make it to the cold north. And he's like, I pledged to this though, so I'm going to do it. But then Harrier says that he's giving back the pledge. And Sothan's like, I am not going to offer that pledge twice. He's thinking that from what he had heard, Abiyabadashar is a place that the demons can't go. So he's like, all right, I'm sure we can make it there. You know, let anybody else go wherever they want. Let this other tribe who is also not going with Harrier, you know, try to head for the hills. No, he is going to Abiyabadashar. So he very quietly gathers his people and is like, all right, we're just going to break off. We're not going to tell them where we're going, but we are going to go and we're totally going to make it. As his little group has broken off and is heading towards Abiyabadashar, they notice something is following them. And to their horror, it's the black dogs that Aniron had used once before that had been so effective and had killed so many people and, more importantly, all of their dogs. These black dogs come running and they attack, but they don't attack the people. They attack all of their Shotars, basically dismount everybody, and Sothan is now on the ground. The black dogs are they just keep on going after all of the camels. And Sothan turns and he sees a person coming. And so he pulls his sword. He has heard about Aniron, but he's never seen her. But he pulls his sword. He is not a fool. He is not a coward. He pulls his sword and goes running towards Aniron and realizes that he's holding a snake. This freaks him out. He throws it down. When his sword hits the desert, it turns back into a sword. And Aniron just laughs at him. You creatures have such simple minds, she said. No, it couldn't harm me, even if you had hit me. But, you didn't answer the question that I don't think you heard me say. Where are you going? Um, Sathan can hear that everyone is being attacked. He can hear the camels screaming. He can hear his people screaming. And he says, I am the leader of the Baratar. Tell me what you want me to do to save my people, because he can hear them. He can hear them dying. Walk with me, Umara of the Baratar, said Anirin, holding out her hand to him. She meant him to take her hand, and so Sathan got to his feet, and he did, as if he were her leader, leading her away from the pledging tent to disclose before the people that her marriage was ready to be made. But when he set his hand against hers, it was as if he set his hand upon the metal newly plucked out of a bed of coals, and when he tried to pull his hand free, her fingers closed in a grip that he could not break. Walk with me, Sathan, Anirin said again. To be a child of the Isvai was to be strong. All of his life, Sathan had been told there were 1,000 paths that led away from the tents of the Isvani. One might leave one's own tribe and join another tribe that had softer ways. One might leave the Isvai and go live in one of the Atreyu cities, sleep in a soft bed, and never fear a sand wind or hunger or thirst or the heat of the sun. To gain the freedom and the beauty of the deep desert, the price the Isvani paid was in the coin of pain, loss, and uncertainty. Sathan was not a stranger to any of these. The pain in his hand, as if he had plunged it into a basket of red-hot coals, was an agony worse than he had ever known, and yet this was nothing to the horror of the demon's words. Anirin, she reminds me a little bit of the Endarkened of the last 3 books, but like I said in the last recap, she's also really childish and really petty, and I really think that she is like the dark mirror of Kerta, who is also very childish and petty, but good. And Iron's like, it's wonderful that you came to me. I am getting really tired of waiting for Bisochim to bow down and worship me. Because, as soon as he does that, then we can make a whole new race of demons and we can claim this world. And I want it to be Bisochim because he had the nerve to defy me. Do you know that he stopped me from causing you all to cease to live on the day that he brought me into this world? I could do it now. I wouldn't be all that hard. But, she points out to Sathan, if all of you cease to live, then Bisochim isn't actually going to bow down and worship me. And I can't figure out why, so you need to tell him, or to tell me, why he isn't doing what I want him to do. Come on, Sathan. I know that you know his secrets. Sathan is opening his mouth because he desperately wants to tell her anything. But honestly, all he can do is kind of make a low moan in pain. He's pretty sure that everything that she is doing, like this agony of his hand burning, is probably all an illusion, the same as the illusion of his sword turning into a snake, but it's a very good illusion. And Anirin just looks at him and she's like, I need to be a little bit more careful. For so very long, we could only make Bisochim do what we wanted by telling him it was to keep all of you alive. or the creature of magic, that dragon he's got, to keep her alive. But he wouldn't know right now, though, if you died because you left him, and so it won't even matter. Sathan is trying to offer up anything in his mind. He's racking his brain, and he only can come up with, if you kill us all right here, you won't be able to kill us right in front of him. And isn't that what you want? She's like, I don't think you matter, because he has others with him. I could make 1,000 of your kind cease to live, and there would still be more of you. And even here, I could enter the minds of the ones who sleep with him and think themselves safe. And every day I could call upon one of them to cease to live, and the last one would not be gone for a long time. But I still don't think that would work. Sathan, you have to tell me exactly what is going to make Bisojim bow down and worship me. Sathan is trying his hardest not to think about Abi Abadashar, not to say anything. And Aniran, I think she's picking up little bits of this from his mind. But, she's like, maybe you don't believe me, Sathan. Maybe you don't think that I could cause anyone to do anything that I want them to do, but here, I'll show you. She hands him a knife and she's like, cut your heart out. Sathan doesn't want to cut his own heart out. Who would? But to his horror, he sees his hand start to move on its own, and that is how Sathan's end comes. Some of his people hear his end coming, and they pull up and they stop, and they look behind them, and they see Aniran, who is coming towards them, and the chapter ends with one of Sathan's final tribe members peering into the distance. Razinda peered into the distance, and at last she saw what the other had seen. She could not see the shotar at all, and she knew that its coat must be as dark as the hair of a black goat. Ashtaban, she thought. Now even our own shotars become Ashtaban to plague us. The shotar had a rider, and she could see it clearly because the rider's robes were red. And that is where the end of the chapter, The Slow War, ends, with the death of all of the people who left with, or who didn't leave with Harrier and Tercel, with Tercel realizing that he doesn't think he knows, or he doesn't think Harrier knows what the heck he's doing. Aniran playing with people, kind of the way that the demons played with their enemies in the first trilogy, and our realization that probably everybody's gonna die unless something good happens. Although we have half a book still, so I don't think we're going to have a lot of really good things happening now. So, yeah. Interesting. Disquieting, which is a great word, but kind of, I think that's why I've said so many times that I'm never sure which trilogy I like better, because this one is the Enduring Flame is a lot bleaker, because we did lose people in the Obsidian trilogy. There were thousands and thousands of people that Kellen kind of knew that were lost, but it was faster. it wasn't this slow attrition and thinking that nothing that you do is going to even matter. And that's an interesting difference between the two trilogies. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully that worked out well. Hopefully I can get at least a little bit ahead so that you guys don't ever have to deal with another night of me just putting up a post saying, I don't feel good. Although, I mean, with any luck, I will feel fine and this will never happen again, but I don't know. I can't tell if this is like some sort of a flu, although if it was a flu, I would probably feel worse now. It's probably just a change in the weather. I blame the change in the weather for almost anything that makes me feel icky. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you next time.